this realization of the apparent duality, and duality, this space and that which rises and falls in space, is the first realization. I mean, when we talk about embodying, we embody the idea more fully, because it's kind of the first movement away from, because before there's only the separate self, isn't there? There's me, and I'm putting all this effort in. I've been through so much. I've got all these labels. I've got this medication. I've got this new role. I've got these new labels. I've got this recovery. But the person's still intact, isn't it? So naturally, the first realization is that all of that exists in a narrative and a story, and the relationship to all of the external stuff. And then, of course, once we realize that sense of beingness and that presence, that which we used to be on the outside of, using meditations as tools and looking into meditation and going, oh yeah, this is better, I really like this objective temporary experience. We kind of reverse the polarity, don't we? And we realize that actually we're looking out of it. But now there's all this stuff that I find objectionable or difficult, or that I'd rather wasn't happening. So there's some great stuff in there. It's good to that's it's necessarily the first movement, if you like, and it's all really just one fluid movement. But that movement which you've expressed so well there is that then the self co-ops that experience and becomes like, we might say, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but loosely say, oh, now I'm non-dual self, because it's still self and it's hijacked the experience of its realization of its own absence, if you like. It's creating a life for itself now by trying to be non-dual self. And what it wants to happen is be so good at that it wants these other things to not happen in it, so that it can be the best non-dual self, and talk about that. I'm not saying that's happening for you, but something like that naturally occurs, So for me, what I did was I went off and created Gutta Monk B, and then become that character instead. Yeah. I'm hoping I've become less identified as that, but it's still there, because that duality that you described is inevitable, But the further movement, not the second movement, but the further movement of embodying the realization that you're not all the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, is to become less attracted by them, certainly less attached to them. And this appears as the decline in thoughts and feelings about the thoughts and feelings. So, because there is the decline of the sense of separation that the self has. And it's not, because we hear stuff like I'm saying to you now, we realize that second, thoughts and feelings arise, and then the thoughts and feelings about the thoughts and feelings, that's actually the self. So thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving are just movements of beingness. But the one having thoughts and feelings about the thoughts and feelings, that's the self. Paul Hederman says it really well. He says that same thing. That, it's not the initial arising, it's the one trying to do something about what arises. And so once we hear that very thing, we begin to sink back into the beingness, regardless of what arises. And that does take time and continual inquiry to embody that, really. And to become less and less interested, and spend less and less energy investing in and articulating and trying to improve what arises. Because how can something that doesn't exist be improved? How can emptiness, a movement of emptiness that seems to be something, but when you use inquiry and look into it, there's no one there, and there is no self, because we have this thing, don't we? We used to talk about selfing. I don't really talk about that much at the moment, because I'm not really in that place anymore, but there really isn't any selfing, and there is no self, which is why we do inquiry, and we realize that the beingness that we are is ever present, and movements of it. We start to embody that expression, those words, much more and become comfortable, and it becomes sense making. It happens to us. And so that sense of peace and calm and tranquility, even if it's not always apparent, is never far. It never takes long to turn around and go the other way from it. And that doesn't stop us being in the world and getting furious and falling over and falling upwards and making mistakes and looking at objects and living life and that all just becoming radically okay. I mean, didn't we all learn on the progressive path? It's not the mistakes we make, it's what we do about them. And how we treat others as a result of them. Children is a really good example. You have children, don't you? And I've said this before, just as Scott Peck said in Further Along the Road Less Travelled, how do you teach children how to be humble and ask for forgiveness and make apologies and make amends and do all of that stuff that 12-steppers do so well? 12-steppers make fantastic parents because they have all that reflective way of living. And that, okay, what does this say about me? Where am I in this? We realise, whether it's on a progressive path or an absolute path, that it's really not about other people. No one's making us unhappy. No one's ever let us down. No one's ever disappointed us. Those are all our feeling spectrums and part of our feeling spectrum. And we carry them, and it's what we do about them and what we can do with them, because they are gifts just like any other. As we said in the meditation, once we take out the morality of good, bad, evil, like, dislike, and that doesn't mean it isn't. Some things are super comfortable, we want to stay there, and other things are so terribly uncomfortable that we would rather be having any other experience than this one. Grief is the greatest example, loss and the vacuum and void that opens up. But having that sense of serenity in the midst of a calamity is real riches, isn't it? How could we be any other richer than that in relation to how we experience the experiences of things? The experience of simply experiencing, the knowing being of simply being, is never affected by the things that happen in it.